Hello and welcome to another Comics Burst from the Full Force podcast, sponsored by Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, where we take an in-depth look at the newest G.I. Joe comics and related titles of the week, with me as your host, Chris Silent but Deadly Option McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80. Joining me on this episode are a right couple of Irish boyos, Paddy Grievous Bodily Charms Lennon and Brian So Lucky He's an 8-leaf clover Hickey. On this instalment of your absolutely favourite kind of burst, we have the brand new G.I. Joe Silent Option Issue 1, a new story arc featuring Dr. Venom following the Special Missions break for A Real American Hero, and the usual glut of Transformers issues. So without further ado, let's get stuck into this Comics Burst. Transformers Lost Light 23. The final battle is here. Bots will live, bots will die, and the craziness can only increase. We're halfway through a finale 6 years in the making, and if you've ever loved a bot, you won't want to miss this. Now, you kind of messaged me earlier on to say that you were very angry about this issue. So I mean, go into it. Tell me what the problem is.
I wouldn't describe myself as very angry. What I would say is, we were talking last week about the previous two issues, 21 and 22.
Yeah.
We both mentioned that 21 was like all of the bad stuff that Lost Light has about it. You know, people sitting around talking and sharing jokes and just dumping lots and lots of exposition on each other.
Yeah.
And then issue 22 was like so much more of an improvement. You know, and it was the good stuff that you'd expect from Lost Light.
Yeah.
And then this issue, I think, brought in a lot of the bad stuff again. Whereas I thought, you know, issue 22 is probably one of my favorite recent issues of the series.
Yeah.
This one is like, it feels like they literally halt what's going on in the issue and have characters dump exposition at each other again. Like I counted, like literally the first half of the issue is Adaptus and Primus screaming exposition at each other while everybody stands around on the bridge and watches them do it.
Yeah.
And then you have Solomus and Adaptus fight. Nobody steps in to break them up, even though there's like 40 people watching them.
And there's some pretty brutal actions going on in that fight as well.
Yeah,
like things being cut off. And
people are standing beside each other, looking at them do this to each other, and then they end up, Solomus ends up killing Adaptus by drilling a hole in his head, and then they both disappear into ash. But all the other characters are standing there looking at them murder each other, and then they carry on as if nothing has happened. So I just, it's like it's bizarre, Chris.
Okay,
it's like how could the quality be like up and down like this? It's insane.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I had a slightly different response to it. Like, I totally agree with what you're saying about, in the past, Lost Light has had that thing where it struggles with, just loads and loads of talking. Just, like, okay, we get it. Everyone's funny. But it doesn't have to be like 6 or 7 pages of solid just back and forth going over the same thing, like where you could probably get away with half a page of that. And I agree. I think that some cases in the past that has been a pain in the butt. In this case, I didn't feel as though it was unwarranted. I feel like it can, when it's done badly, that can, it's the worst. When it's done well, I feel like you can get away with a lot of exposition, a lot of talking, a lot of back, because there's a lot of kind of a lot of kind of going back in the past and having a look at, some of the like mini reveals about kind of how Rung is Primus and all this kind of stuff. And how he, what I quite liked actually initially was when he's asked by, that they're arguing all over the place, saying he's not a god, he's not this, he's not that. And then Hot Rod just says, okay, are you Primus? And he looks at them and his arm starts fixing it, like he starts fixing himself.
Yeah.
And he's like, clearly I am. Like, but he doesn't know. He's just getting these like bits of information come through, and then there's a mini flashbacks. And I like how it wasn't just like a dump of a flashback and then, it was kind of in and out, shake it all about. No one, you didn't actually kind of go in there and live in that world for an element. It's just kind of like, he threw it at you in these little thoughts and stuff like that. And I quite like the pace of this one, because what's happening is obviously that huge planet-sized Titan is just trashing the joint, and it's getting closer.
The alternate universe Primus.
Yeah, and it's getting closer and closer and closer to their ship. and they're, you got like, they're kind of going, right, we need to get this ship out of the way, but at the same time that's happening. So all these things are happening at once, and even though it feels like there's this rush on, I feel like it, for the first time in ages, where there's been, usually when they rush these issues, you're kind of like, that needed more space, but I feel like the rush gave this a different feel. Like, so I wasn't sitting there reading tons and tons and tons of information. It was more like, it was a bit faster because of that feeling that's going on at the same time. And I think that, from a personal point of view, was enough for me to feel that it wasn't the usual Lost Light kind of situation. It's funny, we both have very different feelings about the book.
Whereas I felt it was a slog to read the issue. And actually, I read it earlier on today when I picked up the comics, and I read it again before we sat down here again. Because I wasn't that impressed when I read it earlier on today, but I decided, look, I'll give it another go, so I could write some, and write some notes for stuff to talk about. But again, I just felt it was a complete slog of an issue to get through. Because when you have that Adaptus Primus, chatting to each other for 10 pages, then the back half of the book is Epistemus the Magnificence, giving them all an exposition dump on what has to happen, and it just. Again, I just thought, oh my God, again?
But at the same time, I felt like that had to happen in this issue, though. I feel like you had to have all of those guys either, like getting to the point of what's going on, which was the fact that Epistemus is, technically there's something else going on there behind the scenes. They're trying to get over, and they want to eat everything, whatever the that means.
But it's like, guys, I think they've probably tried to cram a little bit too much into this last story arc.
Good point. Yeah,
because you've got one issue. They've said you've got one issue left in this story arc, and then the last issue of the series is essentially a wrap up of a last goodbye to all the characters.
Yeah.
So they keep adding, there's another person behind the scenes here, and you're like, you don't have space to do this. You barely have space to tell the story you're telling as it stands, and now you want to add another threat in the background that you have.
What's funny about that point is the fact that you're right. Like, if they're bringing something in only to quash it before it's even appeared, what's the point? Because there's, it's almost like there's also this threat, but it doesn't matter because in 3 issues time, it doesn't matter.
Well, in 1 issue time, it has to be wrapped up.
Oh, I see.
In 20 pages, it has to be wrapped up because, like I said, the last issue is a goodbye issue essentially, and isn't going to move. There's one last issue in this story arc to wrap up this whole Primus and the gods and stuff.
Yeah.
Storyline, and then they're introducing stuff up until the last page of this issue. I believe James Roberts said at TFCon there a few weeks ago that this was originally, he had planned out that this series would be 43 issues rather than 25.
Yeah. And
it seems like he didn't cut back on any of the ideas he wanted to do when he was told he had half of the issues that he thought he had left.
Yeah. I wonder if it won't end at all. I wonder if it'll just be like this open-ended type ending,
He doesn't, because he mentioned that the Scavengers 2-parter that occurred about 6 issues ago, he had planned for that to be a 5-parter, but he just seems to have crammed 5 parts worth of stuff into 2 issues. So he obviously, whereas he could have maybe cut things back and cut things out and a little, he just seems to have left it all in there, and just rather than showing it to us, it's just like, well, I'll just have the characters tell you that's what happened.
Well, with all that said and done, Paddy, what would you give this last issue of Lost Light? What would you give it in the potatings department?
So Lost Light 23, I'm just going to go for 2.
I'm going to go 3.5 because even though I said I still enjoyed it, I agree with you in the case that it's a little bit of a callback to some of those issues that have really, been a bit of a pain to us. But I didn't feel like it was one of those. I thought it was done quite well, but that's just my opinion. But again, I still want to see, there's a lot of stuff I want to see, I want to know how it finishes, basically. This is very intriguing to me. But anywho, let's move on to Optimus Prime. Optimus Prime 23. The battle against Unicron forces Optimus Prime's colonist soldiers to contend with a brutal reality. They have no homes to return to, but when they make a move against Trypticon, the human-controlled home of the next generation of Cybertronians, can the end be far behind? Now, before I get your thoughts on this one, Paddy, I just wanted to make a couple of things that I picked up on being a G.I. Joe fan in here. One was all of a sudden, kind of G.I. Joe are back in it in a more prominent way than they have been in recent issues. We've got Talon, Spike, Flint, High Tech, Mainframe, and Marissa Fairborn kind of like in this one. Now, I don't know about you, but I like the fact that they threw in like a little kind of callback to the HQ. They've got the Vamp in there. They've got like the Dragonfly. They've got a few of the kind of, the G.I. Joe vehicles and everything. What I didn't quite understand was any of this story at all. Like, I was really confused with all of a sudden the art has changed dramatically as well, which, I mean, it's not the worst art in the world, but it's, I don't know, sometimes I look at the panel, like there's a panel with Mainframe when he, spoiler alert, gets basically almost killed, but he does get killed, but this is before he dies. He's just been like smashed to death almost in the Vamp. And he's like, it's the worst drawing of anything I've ever seen in my life. But
this is the panel where his nose is bigger than his head, right?
It's so weird. So weird. But other than that, like there's some good Transformers art in there, but when it comes to the actual human aspect, I think there's a real gulf of difference between the two styles.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. It's Sarah Petrie Duchère,
who does some great stuff as well.
Who's done some really great stuff in the past in the Windblade series and Until All Are One. And this is like, I don't know if she was given like a week and told this needs, you've got 20 pages to do in a week. Because there's literally pages there where particularly some of the G.I. Joe characters suffer from it, where there's no, like in one panel there's a couple of pages there where Flint on one panel looks like Flint. You've got pouches on his, he's got his vest, he's got the shotgun shells in his vest. And then the next page, all that detail is missing. All you have is the solid shapes. You don't see the detail that was there in the previous page. So I have to wonder whether it was done in a rush to meet deadline and pressure because the other artist couldn't get it done. Because she hasn't really done a whole lot of work for them recently. It looks like it's the epitome of a fill-in issue done at the last minute.
And coming back to the story, because obviously I have to acknowledge the fact that it's not in Sarah's like usual style for me. Like
no,
I don't. This looks like it's one of those, like exactly what you just said. Like it's been, we need to get this done on a time crunch. But
it's been
you got 1 week to do this issue, and I think that in terms of the story though, I just wasn't. I thought this was a real weird issue. It feels like a one shot. It feels like it's got nothing to do with what's been going on. All of a sudden, it's it's the Jazz thing, obviously from last time. They're on a rescue mission for Jazz. But it means, obviously, clashing with other Transformers and G.I. Joe. And I just didn't believe... I mean, okay, so what? They're on a rescue mission. They engage in this battle, but neither of them want to actually kill or hurt each other. They just want to rescue Jazz. And the other ones want to stop them from doing so. But then it gets slightly more elevated. And, of course, now what really confuses me is why there are like 3 G.I. Joe characters in this battle. It's like Flint, Mainframe, and High Tech, who runs off and hides anyway. Mainframe runs into a Vamp and thinks he can stop Transformers. I just don't really understand that. And then one of them just crunches his car to bits
with non-lethal rounds as well. He's not even trying to kill them.
It's so odd. And then it's almost like an accidental but not accidental death at the same time. So then there's the whole thing of, you've killed somebody. Oh no, this was supposed to be a rescue mission. I don't know. It just felt so weak as a premise.
The basic problem here is nobody gives a shit about Gimlet and Bump and Roulette and Midnight Express and Slide. Like nobody gives a shit about them.
And Mainframe and High Tech.
And they've decided with very few issues left to give 2 issues to them because the next issue is a continuation of this. Like, I know we complain that everybody in the Lost Light has exactly the same personality, but those 5 characters don't have a single memorable characteristic between the whole lot of them.
No.
I do not see why these characters who have been, they've been in a couple of issues of this Optimus Prime series, but they've never really contributed in any big way. And none of them are particularly big names in, Transformers history. Midnight Express might be the only one who's actually ever been in a cartoon.
Yeah.
I don't see why they needed to give them 2 issues.
What makes me laugh is the fact that it does fit. Well, it doesn't make me laugh, but it does feel like they've all of these characters have just been like picked out of a hat and thrown together. Like at least with some of those other kind of mishmash band of brothers type groups in previous issues of other Transformers comics, it feels like there's a connection between them, even though there's a lot of distance historically or a lot of distance in the toy realm or whatever. What the comics have always done really well is to kind of make kind of very weak characters very cool. Now is not the time to be doing this. You've got like a few issues to go. Make every issue count. Make them big. Go out with a bang. You're talking like as we said, like 3 issues. And I know there's a bit of a time crunch here because they're behind, but they've always been behind. When have they been ahead of themselves in the Transformers comic universe? So just, make these issues count. And one thing I really didn't like was the very throwaway nature of the kind of G.I. Joe kind of characters. And the same way, like, I don't really care right now because the universe is ending. This whole combined universe has left a bit of a bad taste in the mouth. So whenever I see the G.I. Joe team and they're not doing anything, they're just running around on the ground, barking orders at stuff, but not actually doing anything other than getting crunched or somehow avoiding death all the time, like Marissa and Flint and High Tech and Scarlet and all these kind of characters. And I'm thinking, well, okay, so why are they even in this like situation if they don't have Cybertronian technology to kind of
because of corporate synergy, Chris. Now move on.
Nuts, innit? Nuts. So that's what bugs me. It bugs me the fact that they're in this, but for no apparent. The only reason is just to be in the background. But anyway, wasn't a fan of this issue at all. And as such, what potating would you give it, Paddy?
This is a 1 potating.
Oh God!
Which I don't believe we've ever given that anymore before.
I don't know. I think I'm not. I'll have to trawl back and find out. But I think you're right. I am also going to give it a 1 because I want to be impressed by an Optimus Prime comic, but it just hasn't happened yet. The only time that Optimus Prime has done anything, as in the comic, has done anything for me, is that Shockwave reveal, and that is and it's only those like that panel of reveal, and then the exposition of what he did over those 4 million years. So other than that, Optimus Prime really are failing on every single level. Anyway, moving on to the World Eater himself. Transformers Unicron, issue 4. Unicron sets his sights on Earth, but is anyone left to defend it? That's all IDW put on this description. 1 line, I think it was. But anyway, that's quite a good one. So anyway, Paddy, what did you think of... Oh, actually, can I also make one more point before I go into any more? They use G.I. Joe in such a better way in both artistically and in the storyline for this issue. So go for it. What are you going to say?
But okay, part of what I imagine why you're saying that is because the G.I. Joe headquarters turns up in IDW continuity for the first time ever.
Bloody brilliant. I think it looks
looks
really cool.
amazing.
And that needs to transform into something. That needs to be a third-party transforming city, doesn't it?
Yeah. So it's the souped-up version of the headquarters from the Sunbow cartoon, and it looks great.
It really does.
Why hasn't that been in the comic since day 1? I do not know.
If that was in there and the Transformer, that would have been like a part of Metroplex or something.
The one thing I'd say is the G.I. Joe team and the Visionaries who turn up, they barely get about a page each.
And it's still better than what is done in... I know what you're saying, though.
Still better than the entirety of Citizens Run, eh? So the Visionaries are in it for literally a page, where the Visionaries essentially, instead of having the talisman make Unicron out his guts like we suggested last time,
would have been great.
The Visionaries decide to use it to essentially help evacuate Cybertron and use the magic to teleport people away. Now that's what we assume happened, because actually the issue is so weirdly paced that
Yeah.
it's not actually made clear what they are doing.
Yeah.
Lyric says something like, well, we used the talisman to move the city. Maybe we can move something else. Next panel is weird magic cracklingly breaks out across the planet. And then it cuts to a page where Blur's saying, oh, it's the Visionaries doing this. Like, even though he's never met any of them before.
Yeah.
And he starts moving at super speed and throwing Cybertronians into the crackling energy, assuming that it'll teleport them away. Even though he doesn't know that, he's taking it on kind of an act of fate.
And that's a faith, but with no information of what that is.
With
at the
no
same time.
information. We don't even know if he knows anything about the Visionaries because he never encountered them in the miniseries.
I mean, it's a nice touch if that had a bit more, if he had a bit more connection, like you say, with the Visionaries, knowing what that was about, knowing what they were doing at the same time, then that would have been like, oh, that's really cool and heroic. Because it's sad because obviously he goes around, saves like everybody basically, but not himself, which is like the real sad element. So he ends up kind of, killing himself to save everyone, which is
dying Unicron's hands.
Yeah, exactly. A nice touch, but at the same time a little bit missed where he's got no connection with the Visionaries. So yeah, I agree with that.
The other problem is that the issue is trying to cram so much stuff in. Every scene in it barely gets a page.
I know, a lot going on.
Of room to breathe. So G.I. Joe are there for a page, and Rom is there for a page, and the Visionaries thing, they're there for a page, and they're not referenced again.
Cosmos and his team get destroyed.
And his team get destroyed in the course of a page and a half.
Shockwave,
and then it cuts to Shockwave on Earth for a page.
Yeah.
And he tells he tells his Maximals to start killing off humanity so they can build a colony on Earth. It just, again, they're trying to pay a little bit of attention to every character who's ever appeared in the franchise. And by doing that, they're not giving any character what they're due or owed after 13 years of storytelling. Like they're not satisfactorily servicing any of the characters.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to include everybody.
I feel like it's a bit of a shame, really, and it's something that I did have my concerns about when they revealed that the universe was coming to an end in the IDW continuity, because it all of a sudden it just puts the pressure on to get everything tied up. And or and I mean, I've known it where stories in the past have just left certain things because it's like it's not important. It doesn't mean a massive thing to the end of the story. We don't have to cover every single character we've ever shown. Like we can away with just focusing on a good story. And I think unfortunately it's more like, let's just get all this tied up so that we've got a bit of space to move in the last two issues. But at the same time, I don't know. It's just I feel like it's going to be the same thing throughout, all the way till the end. And at the end of this, so in terms of this one, again, I'm on the fence with it because I think artistically it's gorgeous. I think it's some of the beautiful artwork. It's
Alex Mill doing some of his best work ever. Like the panel, the page, and that's the other thing. The entire Death of Cybertron is given a one single splash page.
Yep.
It's an amazing splash page, but there's barely any time to rest before the next thing has to happen.
Yeah,
they don't let the moment land.
I know no one's
before they're
really
moving on to the next thing.
No one has really even had any kind of sorrow or any kind of like mourning on anything that's happened apart from Rom. I would say Rom has. Right, because you see him every now and again. He's a bit broody. He's a little bit upset, and he keeps mentioning the fact, the homeworld this, the homeworld that. But other than him, nobody is caring. It's just right. We've got to get this done.
I would love to know. I would love to know how long this, what in story time, how long this story is supposed to have taken so far. Because it seems like there's only been about 10 or 15 minutes between certain issues.
You say that, but in one of the issues, somebody says something like he's about this many weeks away or something like that. I think days away or something like that. And I'm thinking, really? Like I thought that was done.
But then he teleports.
Yeah, I thought that was done like minutes ago.
But then he starts teleporting around the place, and you have to assume that most of those colonies have been destroyed in the space of a day or two. Between issues 2 and 3, I think about 10 minutes pass. Like, I'm not joking.
Yeah, it feels like they're basically one unit. They lose a universe, they teleport everyone off it. They get to the next one, they teleport everyone off it, or as many as they can, and that gets destroyed.
And Unicron follows them.
It's just the same
solar system behind them straight away.
Yeah, it's the same thing each time. Obviously, that's they're just leading up to it being Earth is the final stop, and they have to protect the Earth. But I don't know. I feel the same as you about this. I feel again, like in terms of the story, it's a little bit quick, and it's a little bit okay, and let's kill some people, and it's sad, but very, you're moving on very quickly. But in terms of, like, artistically, it's gorgeous, and I would give it 3 stars alone just for that bloody gorgeous G.I. Joe headquarters. But anyway, enough of that. There's also this has to be mentioned too, because this irked me a little bit. But the mini story they have at the end of the Micronauts is the most trite, most like gross way of like mirroring or like metaphor. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like this horrible metaphor for life and the end of this kind of IDW universe. And it's just like, they're all saying things like, we want to spend the time with the ones that we love, and we want to be together with each other and all this kind of stuff, and we'll face the future as we face the past, Micronauts, together. And it's so like, I don't know, it just felt really gross to me. It's considering the Micronauts was like 15 issues, if that. It was like really under the radar, hardly any, and hardly anyone picked it up. I really dredged through a lot of those issues.
It was the lowest selling title in the Revolution series by about 3,000 or 4,000 issues. Like, nobody gave a flying.
And then we get with that. I don't. We just get a really gross mini ending that's like as if to say that I don't know, something like. The future, we never know. We could get another run or something, like it's so like imitating life and trying to.
At least we know the Micronauts have a TV series coming next year.
Well, they're all right. Micronauts are okay. Right. The worst selling out of the combined universe have done all right for themselves. Yeah,
are getting a TV show. Whereas G.I. Joe, where are you? Who knows?
Anyway. With that said, Paddy, what are you going to give Unicron issue 4 as a potating?
I think I'm going to have to go 2.5.
I'm going to go 3 because of that, just because of the art and because of that gorgeous G.I. Joe HQ. I am angry that they're again.
Easy.
I know, but that's just me. But again, like that, the quick use of the other combined elements. I mean, what's the point if you're not going to combine the universe like in one thing? If you're not going to have them interacting, and you're just going to have one page here and one panel here, and what's the point? Just obliterate everyone, and then have the Transformers save themselves. That's just do that. Anyway, moving on. And now we can join Brian as well for G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, Silent Option Issue 1 of 4. Following in the bloody footsteps of the smash hit Dawn of the Arashikage story arc, living legend Larry Hama brings us the newest chapter in breakout character Dawn Moreno's G.I. Joe journey, and her first unofficial mission, as a Joe may very well be her last, and nobody will ever know, because when Agent Helix is involved, the only option is the silent but deadly option. Silent option. Right, Brian, let's start with you. We've actually got Brian and Paddy for a G.I. Joe segment. This is very, very unlike the comics.
I am debasing myself and reading an Arah comic for the first time since 1993.
You disgust me. I'm just kidding.
You've seen the light, Paddy.
Well, listen, man. If Helix is in it, I'm reading it.
Oh, Helix is cool as hell. Right, go for it, Brian. What did you think, mate?
Okay, this is definitely one of the standouts in my current comic book list. This kicks off. You don't even know what's happening. You've got one of these kind of spooky kind of houses. It looks kind of run down. And then it cuts to inside and we see a bomb strike and Dawn Moreno having a conversation with this couple. And we're learning that they're investigating the disappearance of their foster child. And we don't know who that is right away. But as we go through those first couple of pages, those first few panels, Bombstrike and Don Moreno are working their way around the house. They get up into this foster child's room who's been missing now for 4 years. And they start to investigate around the room, and we get some clues to the person's, or to this child's personality. And then it's revealed as they pull open this bookcase and they see this wall with this myriad of kind of missing persons posters plastered to the wall. It's revealed that the person they're investigating or looking for is Helix.
Yeah.
And it just sets the scene for something. It's pretty tense. It's pretty edgy. And as I read this, I was really looking forward for where this was going to take me.
So basically, this is the first time Helix will have appeared in the Real American Hero continuity. So it's kind of bringing the character that first appeared in the Rise of Cobra computer game and was then kind of, an action figure in the Rise of Cobra line, was utilised in the ongoing G.I. Joe comic to actually, I thought, good effect initially. I loved her little mini-series. I really enjoyed her kind of interaction with Snake Eyes and how, that she was kind of this weird savant, kind of like quirky, but at the same time, all very much almost like a genius as well when it came to like numbers and things. Now, Paddy, you're a big fan of Helix.
I am.
Given the start of this, the introduction, do you think that was a strong introduction to kind of to use? Is this a good way to go for the character, do you think?
It's a different take on her. She's definitely a lot more harder edged than the version from the IDW continuity.
Yeah.
Over the years, there's a scene in here where she basically skins a guy alive.
Yeah.
To get some information out of him, which is not something the version in IDW would have done. So I think someone mentioned on Twitter or Facebook today, they mentioned that she's reminded them a lot of the character from the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yeah. Kate said the same thing to me, like today. She was like, I caught her reading it, and she's like, "Is this the girl from the dragon tattoo?" I'm like, it's very similar, isn't it? Yeah.
It's kind that's kind of the take they've done with her, where she's kind of a lone wolf and can be vicious when she needs to be. So yes. it's definitely a change for that character, and I think it works for this. It's I haven't been reading a Real American Hero. Obviously, it's a lot bloodier and more violent and a bit more. It's certainly Larry doing an 18s and above comic rather than something that would be suitable for a younger person, a person under 18 to read.
Totally.
Like this isn't a toy tie-in comic anymore with the levels of bloodshed and mutilation that are going on here.
This is like G.I. Joe all grown up, and I think when you look at, say, the Larry Hama Neto Diaz combo, it makes for some pretty mature reading and some really mature storytelling.
I know, yeah.
Compared to, say the Larry Hama SL Gallant combo, which is maybe a bit safer.
A bit more fanciful, wasn't it? A bit kind of like more towards the sci-fi aspect and a little bit crazier, a little bit zanier. But yeah, you're right. Have you noticed as well the colouring on this gives it that effect as well, doesn't it? It gives a really dark, kind of ominous effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, particularly in this scene, and I know I'm kind of jumping ahead a bit here, but we have Bombstrike obviously gets in touch with Alpine and sends Alpine and Dawn off to Trucial Abysmia.
Yeah, I love that name.
And there's and again they track Helix down to a penthouse apartment, and again they find another kind of myriad of posters on the wall, but this time it's not women. It looks like they're kind of gangsters or human traffickers, as it turns out to be. But just when you talk about the colouring, the way these series of panels are covered as they unveil that wall with kind of Helix's targets highlighted on it, it's pretty dramatic how that's done, and it's beautifully done. And then of course that cuts through to a scene where there's a knock on the door and it's room service.
It looks like a really bad version of the Dreadnoks, doesn't it?
And of course, that level of gore and violence that we just spoke about just explodes onto the panels as these bad guys get taken down. And I've never seen Alpine look so bad as he's dragging one of these kind of henchmen by the ankle to toss him over the edge of the balcony.
Crazy, isn't it? Yeah. And again, and obviously that continues. They follow the trail. They find one of the main bad guys, I think.
Oh, Mahmoud,
you're right. So they find him in, like, intensive care, and she literally killed 50 of his best men to get to him, and he is like he is not going anywhere. So she did that to him on purpose, so that he was like, and he's begging to be killed, and they're like, no, screw you, we'll leave you alone. And then you go back, we switch over to Barovia then, where you've got Torpedo, you've got Bomb Strike, and Takedown / Snake Eyes / Sean Collins as well. So, and then they go on there.
Torpedo, who is managing to wear his wetsuit in downtown Grozny.
He's in his regular civvies in this scene.
Sorry, he changes his clothes about 2 minutes later, and I think it is like the weirdest thing in the world. It's like, why are you wearing your wetsuit in the middle of a city centre?
No, yeah, and when you first see him, you're thinking, okay, cool, it's Torpedo and he's wearing his civvies. But you're right, you turn the page and all of a sudden they just get into their gear. You've got, obviously, Bomb Strike and Snake Eyes dressed in their gear, and Torpedo's wearing his wetsuit. And I'm thinking, okay, so at least it's to kind of like say, it's Torpedo to identify him and so on and so forth. He kind of looks a bit like the Punisher in actual fact.
Yeah.
But I would say wear like more practical
he's
gear.
a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
Those guys wear practical combat gear all the time.
Yeah,
they don't wander around looking like sailors.
Yeah, that needs. I definitely think that would have been a better. That's my only thing about this issue, I must add, that I had problem with was, and it was very, and when it's something like that in a G.I. Joe comic, it's kind of silly to have a hang up about it. And I do think he looks like the Punisher in literally every scene you see him in on the land, like dressed as it. But at the same time, yeah, that could have been dealt with better.
It's obviously a sex thing, Chris.
Big time.
To be honest, right, I didn't mind that because it's okay. So when we see him in a civvies, they have to travel then to the bad guy's base, and this is the guy they're going to. It's Samsa, the next bad guy.
Yes.
And when they're going in there expecting a fight, and the guys are all geared out in their typical G.I. Joe combat gear. So Snake, Throwdown or Snake Eyes, he looks like Snake Eyes. Bomb Strike is in kind of the classic Bomb Strike battle gear. So it makes sense that Torpedo is also in that kind of familiar Torpedo look. And like you say, he looks pretty bad. He looks like the Punisher.
It's superhero time, isn't it, on this one? I think it would have been so much funnier if he'd worn his flippers, though. How funny would that? And his goggles and snorkel.
And a breathing gear, yeah.
Oh, that'd have been so brilliant. But no. And I mean, it makes sense as we go through. So obviously, they reach another human trafficker. The kids, apparently, as they're rescuing these kids from these other guys who were picking them up to take them away, had nothing to do with Samsa in actual fact. And it turns out that Helix has already been there, and she had obviously messed this guy up. So the kids had been like basically doing horrible things to this guy, really kind of messing him up, and with like knives and stuff. But Helix had left the kids alone to do that, so obviously they could get their own, their own back. The problem with that, and something that I find a bit of an issue there, is she's left them alone without any thought of like maybe helping them out with getting the police there to pick them up, or whatever. So I found that a bit odd.
Even in when she was in IDW continuity, she really didn't care for other people.
Yeah, that's probably a good point, actually. That's a very good point.
The only person she had a close relationship with the G.I. Joe team was the Snake Eyes in IDW continuity. So that's not entirely out of character.
I wouldn't say out of character. I just felt it was really, really off. I thought it was a really nasty thing to do. So anyway, those kids are being taken away by these other gang members. Bomb Strike, Torpedo, and Snake Eyes deal with that situation. And Bomb Strike is also quite brutal in that scenario too. They find out that these kids have been basically torturing this Samsa guy, which is fucking violent. And then they let them do it more. They just all right, well, you can get back to torturing this guy now. And I'm like, at what point are these kids going to be taken into some sort of...
Where are the social workers?
Exactly. But
in Barovia, there are none. That's by the looks of it. It's just a world of hell.
Yeah.
This is what I love about Neto Diaz, is he does these beautiful kind of scenes where you get a view from above.
Yeah.
And as they walk into Samsa's office, we get to see our three Joes coming in the doorway. and you just get to see the carnage laid out all over the place, and it's pretty grim.
It is really nasty. I like how it's like almost like a CCTV viewpoint, isn't it? Kind of in the corner of the room looking down. But he does do that quite often. There's some really good scenes from above. You know, like just kind of I do like that technique. And then that leads us to finally Torpedo wearing his sweatsuit for the right reasons. So the last page is basically them.
Nobody else in appropriate gear.
That's another very good point. So they're all basically now you've got a team, the same team of guys on and with Cutter and Shipwreck on the Whale, and I do love seeing the Whale. Any opportunity, I'm happy to see it. So it's really cool to see them all sitting on it, ready to kind of basically go up to this oil rig, and they're going in cold. There's no information about this at all, and it's off the coast of Scotland too. So yeah, I like the fact that they're moving around the world a bit and they're doing some different areas. I mean, obviously, I know we've been to Barovia, we've been to Trucial Abysmia, we've been to all of those Eastern European fantasy countries that I suppose Middle East and Eastern European, aren't they? Because I think Trucial Abysmia is supposed to be in the Middle East. But I know we've been there a lot in The Real American Hero, but it's nice to see Scotland thrown in. And again, Scotland gets a big shout thanks to Destro in the G.I. Joe comics. Yes. So this, I mean, I'm not sure if that's like an inkling as to what we're going to see next. Are we going to see some Iron Grenadiers? Are we going to see Destro appear in this for some reason? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there because of the Scotland connection. What do you guys think?
I think we're going to see a lot more mutilated human traffickers by the end of the series. Like, I know nobody likes human trafficking, but Larry Hama seems to really hate it.
I think it's a therapy thing as well. It's like to get your aggression out in a certain way, so just write these horrible deaths for them, which is brilliant.
They're like the last bad people you can actually really go after in fiction. You know, nobody's really gone after them in a big way before, and now Larry's decided, you know what, I'm going to stick G.I. Joe in these.
It's about time.
And make sure that they know that if I had the opportunity, I would have Helix and Snake Eyes carve these up.
Oh, that's amazing. And we also at the end of this issue, we get a really nice, almost like an epilogue-ish kind of story.
Yeah, retro Snake Eyes carving up yet more human traffickers.
I know, it's lovely stuff.
Now, in this issue, we've seen all three variants of Snake Eyes that are available in era continuity, killing human traffickers. What does that tell you? Larry and Snake Eyes really hate them.
I do like this though. I think it's a nice little kind of obviously because we can use our assumptions. We understand that these at the beginning of the book, we know that the Joes have been tasked to go after this female operative who, because she's after these human traffickers and all that kind of stuff, and there's a file on her somewhere. We can understand that. We don't necessarily need some sort of information to help us with that, but it's nice that they go ahead and do that. And obviously this super top secret element of it where she goes to this shack in the middle of, I think, like Washington somewhere, and what I do think is quite funny is she gets to the Bomb Strike is tasked to meet General Hawk, but in the middle of nowhere, off the grid, so that no one can actually know that they're talking about this stuff, right? So she's like, I'm late, he's late, why are you late? And she's like, well, it's not easy to find this place, and it's not like you gave me GPS, whatever. And he's like, but what makes me laugh is he's basically saying, I can't tell you where we are, but it's somewhere in the Washington forest. And I'm thinking, why would you even say that? Why would you even I know the Washington forest is probably so big it doesn't matter, but at the same time, why are you telling them? Why would you give her the information of that? Because then, you could possibly work out where it is. Plus, she's had to get there, so she knows where it is now.
Presumably, she drove.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not like she's, I don't know. I just find that quite hilarious.
You do see her holding a map at the top of that, and it's just the big green patch on the map, which I presume is the Washington forest.
I can see where it is. I can see where it is, Brian. We've worked it out. Let's just let's send a team over there now. Could you imagine? Anyway, so if Cobra get hold of this map, he is screwed. So anyway, he tells a story that Helix, there's a big file on her. Here's the information. This is the only known image we have of her, which I think is quite cool as well.
That's an amazing image, and I would love that figure of Helix.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love how that kind of red and grey colour palette works really well with that hoodie she's wearing. But looks class.
Big time. I mean, name a character we haven't seen in a comic that we wouldn't want a figure of, Brian, because I mean, they always do some really cool design work, especially like with the Real American Hero. So anyway, he explains that Snake Eyes was tasked with a Intrusial Abysmia, a human trafficking scenario, and he lets it, kills loads of people, he lets everyone out, and then he's about to open the last door, and they're all like, no, don't open that door, she'll kill us all. And he opens it anyway because he's f***ing Snake Eyes, what the hell. And there is, I'm assuming, Helix tied up to a chair, and that's the last thing we see. Now, I'm interested to see where that goes.
Yes.
So what we can kind of ascertain so far is Helix was trafficked as a young girl. She gets out thanks to Snake Eyes. Maybe Snake Eyes takes her under a wing, trains her a little bit. What do you guys think about that? Or do you think I'm jumping the gun a little bit there? Because that just seems to be the case with everyone that Snake Eyes comes across.
Yeah.
I think that...
Roadblock and retaliation, throw down.
Roadblock was the worst. Roadblock was the worst for that, and that retaliation comic preview is like, oh yeah, I trained with Snake Eyes. Off, did you? Anyway, yeah, lols.
Actually, I love that that last panel. Snake Eyes throws open the door, and yeah, of course, it's Helix, tied up to this chair. Looks like she's sitting kind of cross-legged on the chair.
Yeah.
And I've no doubt that this is the beginning of an amazing partnership of.
This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Brilliant. Well, let's get to the potatings for this one, because I think it's a brilliant issue. We've discussed a lot about it. Was there anything else you guys wanted to say about it while we're discussing it?
Just throw in very quickly the on that little epilogue, or that sort of prequel at the very end. The art by Kenneth Lowe is fantastic.
Great, isn't it? Yeah.
I love that really rough, edgy kind of style. And in serious contrast to Neto Diaz's really detailed style. Yeah. Both of which I love. So this is an amazing, absolutely amazing episode.
It reminds me of the colouring and the art style from Cowboy Ninja Viking. I'm not sure if either of you guys have read that, but that's really good. And that's got a very similar thing. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's if you haven't read it, go, and this is to everyone listening. If you haven't read Cowboy Ninja Viking, go get the trade paperback. It's sensational. Anywho, potatings. Paddy, what would you give silent option?
For el opción silencio, I will go for 4 potatoes.
That's a bloody good score from Paddy. Brian, what about yourself?
I mean, I've got to go 5 here. I've been going 5, the last how many months? This is
you're the Justin Bell of the comic ratings world.
But to justify that 5 potatings, we've got the art. We have the amazing writing by Larry Hama. He's deliberately writing a mature story here. He knows the Joe fans are all in their 40s and late 30s, so he's writing for that audience. So it's
I only turned 36 yesterday, Brian. You may off with your late 30s.
Yes, I have to agree with you, Brian. Paddy's really old, and I would have to give that a 5 potatings because it's just absolutely superb. And I'm generous in my potatings for the most part, nowhere near as generous as you are, but I must admit it's an absolute stonker. Larry smashed it out there with the writing. I think it's great. I think it's one of those things where you read it and the characters, you feel the personality from each of the characters, even though you feel like you know them anyway. And you have a certain idea of how they talk and how they would respond to certain things. Larry, obviously, he's created that for everybody. Like, he's given us what we think those characters are supposed to sound like. So, obviously, he's got that advantage. But to still be cranking them out and you still get what you expect from Alpine, what you expect from Torpedo, what you now expect from Bombstrike, who I think is a brilliant character. I love her. And I love the fact that she's become this almost like new field team leader kind of thing. I like her as a kind of infantry squad leader. I think she's really, really cool, and I'm digging this a lot. Yeah, so brilliant. Keep it
and
up.
Hey, It's the only G.I. Joe comic where a human trafficker has had his balls removed by a teenage girl. So, you know.
Bonus.
One last thing to throw
That's
in there.
something that's something you haven't seen before in G.I. Joe history.
But we wanted to. That's another thing.
There's a great scene in here where one guy refuses to tell Bomb Strike, Throwdown, and Torpedo where his boss is. So they get Throwdown to reveal it, to peel off his human mask and show his real face.
Yeah.
And then we get the comic book equivalent of the Wilhelm scream.
All the vowels, right? Apart from like O
You.
and U.
Well, do you know, I'd say Larry's been reading a bit of classic Battle Action Force or listening to some of the other comic bursts, and he's getting the Wilhelm in there. I love that.
He's definitely checking out Disorder of Battle. Anyway, cracking, awesome, brilliant. Get it. If you haven't got it and you're a Joe fan, get it. If you haven't got it and you aren't a Joe fan, get it. It's brilliant. You'll love it. Next up, we have G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 256. The Cobra's Venom part 1 of 5. With a dangerously mysterious weapons shipment en route to Springfield, can our real American heroes, at home and abroad, find a way to stop the evil machinations of Dr. Venom? A bombastic new chapter of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero lore from living legend Larry Hama and exciting new artist Ron Joseph, who was on Revolutionaries, by the way. Now, let's get stuck into this. Before we go through like a play-by-play, what did you think overall of the issue itself? Were you a fan?
Totally. I mean, I've been waiting for 6 months to get back to this. It was 6 months ago that we dropped off from this story. We went on the we had our kind of special missions, and we kind of wrapped up the Don Moreno arc. And Bomb Strike and Ambush and Sightline and some little kid that they'd found on their last mission in Revenge were left trapped down in in this kind of arms factory, this big warehouse. They were trapped. They were locked in when the Black Major called security alerts, and they locked everything down.
As they called him at the end of that issue, the Iron Major.
The Iron Major. And it was never revealed how they managed to get out, but during the Don Moreno arc, there was a flashback or like a crossover or a cutaway to the Iron Major, and it was kind of alluded to that
was
the
a
guys
typo,
had,
by the way. That was a definite typo.
For sure. And it was alluded to that the guys must have somehow smuggled away in arms containers or whatever. So now we're back. We're back in exactly where we left off, and I couldn't wait to get back into this. So, again, overall, this is some quality stuff. Again, not as violent as Silent Option, but still absolutely action-packed, this issue.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a nutshell, we have Dr. Venom working in this laboratory. We have some shipments coming in for him, obviously, for this, for his work. We have two guys that are kind of, they're not Cobra operatives. They're just regular delivery guys, but they've obviously delivered to this place before. They're obviously within, at least in a very low rung of Cobra, knowing the ins and outs of the whole operation and everything, and not being murdered for it. So they're real just like low level Cobra freelance kind of guys by the looks of things. They come in, they're like, as they're walking through this this laboratory, they're seeing these weird things, and they're kind of assuming things, they're talking about stuff, they're almost like filling in the story or explaining what the setup is before. It's a technique obviously of explaining to the reader what is going on. And we see this giant battle android trooper body. We see what looks like this kind of like bronze and black Snake Eyes style battle android trooper body. And we see, and then as they kind of go through and deliver what they're delivering, they kind of get out of there, and then that's when we have Bomb Strike and all the other crew break out of their concealed containers and start to kind of make a plan as to what to happen. Also in that time, you've got Dr. Venom tinkering around and throwing again some exposition back there, talking about some flashback stuff. What
I love here actually is that even before we kind of get to Venom sort of talking to himself and kind of flashing back, you get this kind of high angle view again, and this is actually love what Ron Joseph does here. He reveals the whole lab. And as you see the giant battle android trooper in the background. You see the brainwave scanner, which looks immense. in scale to the human characters. You see this bed with like blood all over the bed, and you go, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
And then there's this lovely series of panels that are kind of cut at sort of diagonal lines as the guys are wheeling their cargo through the lab, and it just as they walk by the brainwave scanner. I mean, it's huge. And again, Ron Joseph's artwork, it's very reminiscent of S.L. Gallant, so I love that sort of connection. It's kind of bringing us back to where we kind of left off.
There's a nice cartoony vibe about it, but at the same time, there's a lot of detail in the faces. Like Ambush has, he's got his big mutton chops, and he looks like really. There's a lot of personality in that face. Dr. Venom has been like, I've always found that Dr. Venom's a bit of a bland kind of face character. He doesn't really do anything for me in a lot of the stuff that he's been in. Like I couldn't, it's hard to recognize effectively. But in this kind of, in the way he's been drawn here, he actually looks really, there's a lot going on, which is interesting because it's basically Dr. Mindbender with a wig on at this stage. Now, he's also got Storm Shadow's kind of brain download, and he's putting that, or puts it, into this like Snake Eyes looking battle android. So it will get confusing as you read this. So that happens, but he's done that so that the battle android can then assist him in hooking him up to this massive battle android, which has got a big TV kind of square head thing, and obviously does that. And then the classic Frankenstein's monster, the switch is pulled down, and you've got this kind of like electric zapping happening where it basically puts Dr. Venom into this massive battle android. Meanwhile, Bomb Strike and the rest of her team are actually, checking this out, and they're kind of going, right, some going down here that we need to sort out. And they kind of get their stuff together. They find a bunch of weapons because they're in a weapons factory, obviously. I think Sightline ends up picking up some sort of flamethrower. She grabs a rifle, and then Ambush gets like a couple of, gets loads of like bazookas and friggin', rifles and stuff. And this little kid who's with them, he grabs a piece as well, and he's all ready to go. And it's kind of like, man, Larry's like using kids in like a lot of his writing at the moment. They're all like they're all friggin' battle hardened. That's
a pretty cool panel where they've just basically pillaged some boxed up bats, and they've pulled all the weaponry off them, and they're all kind of, all geared up, ready to go into battle, and you just see the little kid in the background slapping a clip into a Glock. It's kind of looks bad, but it also there's parts of my conscience that goes,
that's sad, kind of
f***ed up.
Yeah, it is, but it's still, again, pretty cool. And then obviously you get more flashbacks with Venom remembering how, he got Snake Eyes is in the brainwave scanner, the whole Quinn situation in the bunker from back in like Marvel knows what now. And then obviously kind of continuing through that as he's getting transferred to this battle android trooper, even more memories are being, you kind of flashed up on this kind of TV screen of him killing Quinn, shooting him in the back.
Yes.
And then that's when Bomb Strike and the team come out, start guns blazing. The robot sent, the Storm Shadow battle android trooper recognizes a threat. He then turns into like, trying to protect Venom and basically like gets shot up. Doesn't kill him though, even though he's got like rocket launchers, flamethrowers, everything thrown at him. The inevitable kind of explosion happens. Dr. Venom gets thrown, the human version, gets thrown from the brainwave scanner, which is actually technically Dr. Mindbender. I initially thought dead, but, that's not true. And then obviously the battle continues with the Snake Eyes looking Storm Shadow battle android trooper. That's really confusing now, isn't it? After the I wouldn't say that when the dust settles, but Dr. Mindbender comes to, and he's Dr. Mindbender again. And something that I thought was a really, really nice touch, Brian, which I think you'll know what I'm talking about. And you'll.
Oh yeah. So the wig essentially burns off Mindbender, and as he realizes that Venom, I'm free, he's out of my head, he pulls the burning wig off, and then this little flame flickers up past his face and forms like a moustache.
It's brilliant. I love it.
It's superb. I'm Mindbender again.
It's really good. I really thought that was a nice touch. Like it's not obviously so obviously a moustache, but at the same time, that's what they're going for. To kind of say, oh, look, it's Mindbender's back. And yes, he's got no facial hair, so we'll just have this bit of flame fly across him. I just think that's really cute.
It's so well done.
Then obviously the worst happens, and Venom's massive battle android trooper comes to life. Now, and something that this reminded me of, I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but do you guys remember Pole Position, the cartoon?
That rings a bell.
Pole Position. So they had little kind of computer boxes that locked into the car with a face on it, right? And it would be really 8-bit digital kind of style. And they'd pull it out the central console when they wanted to go and do something and plug it in and do some like technical shit, whatever. So that when you plugged it into the car would then breathe life to the car, and you'd have this like, personality. So this little face on a box is basically what Dr. Venom's battle android trooper head looks like. It's brilliant. I love it. It's just so mental as well. It's huge. It's very boxy and it also is a big callback to RoboCop 2 and Ed 209, and I forget what the robot was called in RoboCop 2, the bad one. But like when they had the nuke and stuff, it was a movie, but it was like a very much more kind of mobile, big, hulking kind of robot villain. And it's just that face on a screen is just hilarious.
This kind of reminds me, the last Comics Burst we spoke about a Jamie Lee Curtis movie from the 90s. Virus. And that's what this reminds me of. This is like one of these
I'm not putting that
monstrosities.
in again.
Get that in.
See previous episode. I'm kidding. I will flash that up. But no, I did. I flashed up on the last episode as well. I managed to find it afterwards. And yeah, that Virus guy definitely looked like Johnny Five. No doubt about it. But yeah, I agree. It's a similar kind of thing, really. It's like this, lots of different bits and pieces come together that don't necessarily look like they go together. But, they've created this giant bad guy. And then obviously, they're all like, oh crap, we're screwed. And it's Mindbender, Bomb Strike, the kid, Ambush and Sightline, all just looking up at this thing like, oh crap. And then it's a meanwhile back at the pit type situation, and everyone kind of realizing we're going to have to, it's Duke, Psych Out, Big Ben.
Big Ben, is it?
Which is good, because it's like, oh, we get Big Ben again, who they mercilessly killed in literally the first issue of Revolution, of Revolutionaries or whatever it was. So like that really annoyed me. He was in and then out, Shake It All About, but now he's back in this run again, and I'm really happy for that. So we get Big Ben, Psych Out.
Big Ben was actually part of the original mission crew at Revenge. So
yes.
He'd actually managed to get out because he was still undercover. His cover hadn't been blown. So he's obviously doing a debriefing here with the guys.
God, you've got a better memory than I have, mate. Jesus, yes.
So while they don't know exactly where Bomb Strike and the guys are, Big Ben surmises that it's most likely that they got shipped out to Springfield.
Yeah.
So it's really, Psych Out suggests rescue mission, and Duke is like, there's not a hope in hell we can go into the middle of Cobra territory and bust these guys out.
They'll have to exfil on their own. That sucks. But so again, like, I don't know, just a solid issue. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was like the quirky elements of G.I. Joe, whereas Silent Options seem to be that kind of dark kind of aspect. This is a more kind of, pokes fun a lot, really, doesn't it? There's a lot of kind of like over the top crazy things. But again, that's what I do like G.I. Joe for, that as well as the dark stuff. But what did you think, Brian?
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. As I said, I've been waiting 6 months for this. It did not disappoint. It's a completely different type of storytelling to Silent Option. This is a fun roller coaster ride. It's not supposed to be heavy. It's not supposed to be dark. It's action packed. It's lighthearted, and it's a little bit zany in parts. But I absolutely loved every single page of it.
Here's a question for you: do you expect them to have a bit of a rogue rescue mission kind of situation happen? Do you think they'll, like, a couple of the guys will go in and help, even though they're not allowed to? That's what I'm feeling at the moment. I'm feeling something like that might happen.
Well, they give us a preview of kind of next month's cover, and we see, Outback, Hawk, and Rock and Roll. Yeah, that would be great if those guys just busted into Springfield to get Bomb Strike and the crew out.
It does look pretty. Yeah, I mean, that would be a neat group of guys to do that, like real old school, real heavy-handed. Outback's got a lot of exfil experience, obviously getting away from the whole situation back in like one of those really, like, I can't remember the issue number, but on the cover he's underneath that cliff and all of the guys chasing him are on the top, and he's kind of like breathing like in the in the middle of snowy conditions with his t-shirt on. And I love that cover. It's really, really kind of cool cover. But again, like, he got out of that, so maybe he's going into to help this time, and that would be awesome. Although I have learned in my life, reading comics, never to take into account too much of what you see on a cover, because oftentimes they'll have nothing to do with what's going on the inside. I mean, that hasn't necessarily been the case for a lot of these issues, but that does bring me to something else I needed to talk about, and that's that we finally get that beautiful Jamie Sullivan Ace Rattlers Sky Striker cover with this issue, and I haven't seen it. I've got the cover A, which is the Dr. Venom as the huge battle android trooper on the front, and I desperately want that. I desperately want that Jamie Sullivan cover. Which one did you pick up?
I actually got the variant cover B with Jinx and the Red ninjas on it.
Right.
And it looks like that the Jamie Sullivan one, that's the retailer incentive, which means it's probably going to be trickier to get our hands on.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking for that one, though, because that is a beautiful cover.
Yes.
In any case, let's get to the crux of this. Potatings, Brian, for G.I. Joe Real American Hero 256.
Just going to go all out five on this. Fantastic.
Oh, I'm going to go 4 because it was a solid one. I loved it. Had a lot of really good elements to it. We get Mindbender back. Venom is now kind of transferred into a different machine, so at least he could be a different bad guy, different villain. And a little bit more menacing, a little bit more kind of, a bit more dangerous. I like that. He's almost like the Ultron now. Like, you just can't get rid of the bloody dude. But, yeah, beauty. Anyway, let's move on to our last segment of the day. Paddy's pick and Brian's best. Starting with Paddy's pick. What have you gone with this week that isn't necessarily on our list of issues, Paddy?
It's not necessarily on our list of issues, but it is kind of... It is kind of connected to... There are a couple of G.I. Joe connections in here. I've picked The Dead Hand from Image Comics. Issue 6, I believe, came out this week, which means the first 6 issues will probably be in a trade paperback next month or the month after.
Yeah, I think it's called Cold War Relics, isn't it? The trade paperback.
Yeah. If you're into G.I. Joe or Metal Gear Solid, this is going to be 100% right up your alley. It's written by Kyle Higgins. The art is by Stephen Mooney, who... I'm sure Brian will know from because he's a local lad. He worked for IDW on his own creator-owned series, Half Past Danger, and he's also done a bunch of covers for Larry's Real American Hero run. Specifically, I think for the Cobra World Order, he did some of the covers for that series, that kind of mini-series.
Awesome.
About 2 years ago. So this is, like I said, I know for a fact Stephen is a huge G.I. Joe fan, since there's only like 6 of us in Ireland, and we all know each other.
I'm friends with all of you on Facebook as well.
Yeah. He's a big G.I. Joe fan, and you can tell that in the art for this series. It is very heavily inspired by G.I. Joe and like I said, Metal Gear Solid. There's a lot of references to that in there as well. It's a spy story set in the end of the Cold War and the present day. I think anybody who likes the comics we talk about will probably like it. So if you get a chance, pick up the trade of that next month.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paddy. I might even pick that up as well. That sounds really, really interesting.
I think you'll get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And his art... Stephen was always a pretty good artist, but this is the best stuff he's ever done.
Awesome.
It's so detailed. If you're a gun nut, like a lot of G.I. Joe fans are, and they like their technology to look like it's how it's supposed to look like, you'll get a lot out of it, because he's definitely gone in under reference and so on for this. So I think you like it.
Brilliant, thank you. Brian, what about Brian's best for this week?
My Brian's best is The Ballad of Halo Jones Volume 2 by Alan Moore and Ian Gibson.
Cool.
This is a series, this is a story from 2000 AD, originally released back in the 1980s. And while it was originally published in black and white, they have reissued this in colour with new colours by Barbara Nozenzo. I think Nozenzo. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name right.
That's right.
But it's beautifully reproduced artwork, beautifully coloured, and it's some of Alan Moore's finest writing. So I would highly recommend this one. Ian Gibson's artwork is superb. And if you're familiar at all with British comics and 2000 AD, you've come across his work in the past. So the Halo Jones comics in the 80s and 90s, I think they were reissued as part of Quality Comics in kind of this, American style comic size, and they had been coloured up for that. But this particular reproduction, as I say, it's brand new colours. The quality of the reproduction on this is far superior to the Quality Comics from the 90s. It looks and reads absolutely brilliantly. It's a classic story. It's well told. Highly recommend it.
Fantastic.
It's also famously the first comic that Alan Moore wrote that he ended up having an argument with his publisher over, something that will continue for the rest of his career up until now.
Amazing.
He got very annoyed with the fact that they wouldn't give him ownership of the character.
Right.
And he left 2000 AD under a cloud, went to DC Comics, wrote Watchmen, left them under a cloud.
Yeah. Yeah.
And has done that essentially for every project he's ever worked on ever since.
Well, he loves clouds, clearly.
He does.
It could have been worse. He could have left under a McCloud.
But Halo Jones is the one that started his tempestuous relationship with his own editors.
Amazing. Well, again, and that's another one, Brian, that I'll definitely have a look at. That's an interesting one too. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for those picks, Paddy's pick and Brian's best. Lovely stuff. I may add my own, like Chris's classics or something, but I don't think people really give a shit. Thank you guys so much for jumping on again. That's another classic Comics Burst in the bag. That's it for this installment of the Full Force Comics Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-hosts, Paddy and Brian. See you next time, and as always, full force. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/TheFullForce, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback, questions or just a troll. Look out for more of these comic bursts on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, our Facebook page, Twitter feed and YouTube channel from now on. Full Force. And a big shout out to our sponsors, Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, located at 601 Business Loop 70 West Suite 263, located in the Parkade Center, Columbia, Missouri. You can visit their website at distantplanetcomics.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/distantplanetcomics.